Hello and welcome to Low Carb Conversations. I'm your host, Leah Williamson. I'm with my other host, Holly Jean. Welcome, Holly.
Hello, hi.
Our guest today is leading authority on nutrition and human metabolism, Dr. Cate Shanahan, a board-certified family physician with over 20 years of clinical experience and New York Times bestselling author of The Fat Burn Fix, Deep Nutrition, and Food Rules. Her expertise is fixing the underlying problems that cause metabolic damage and inflammation, leading to autoimmunity, weight gain, diabetes, cancer, and accelerated aging process. Welcome to the podcast, Dr. Cate Shanahan.
Thanks, Leah and Holly. It's really great to meet you guys.
I'm really excited to talk to you today. Actually, we were just talking off air about how your book, Deep Nutrition, which we'll talk about in a little bit, is like a must-read book in the nutritional therapy circles. And I had an interesting thing come up. I was having lunch with one of my friends. She's a dear friend. I don't see her very often. And she's unfortunately been having some health challenges. And she had this book with her and she dumped it on the table beside me. And she's like, "Have you read this book?" And I said, "Well, I've seen this book before because it's been around the circles." And she said, "Leah, you have to read it and you have to have Dr. Cate on the podcast." And so, so that's how this all came about. And I was like, "Yes, we do. I'm surprised we haven't had her on the podcast before." So I'm really excited to talk to you today. So thanks for being a guest on the podcast.
Pleasure to be here. Thank you.
So we would really like to start off with people getting to know you a little bit more. So if you wouldn't mind telling us a little bit about your journey and, what led you to discovering some of these great wisdoms or pearls of wisdom that you're bringing to us today.
Yeah, so I always had this wild fantasy that I would be able to get to the underlying cause of people's problems. And then after going through medical school, I was like, that's not going to happen because we don't learn that. Like we learned that like 90% of what's in the pathology book is idiopathic, meaning we don't know the cause. And so I gave up on that idea. And while I was practicing on the island of Hawaii as a family medicine physician, which is like a GP, I think in Australia, I got really sick. I couldn't walk. It was horrible. I had fevers and nothing helped. Nobody could tell me even what was wrong. And so it was like, nutrition to the rescue. And I didn't even think of it because I was like, well, I know everything about nutrition. I went to medical school. So my husband is what got me like to open my eyes to this whole world of nutrition reality that was actually all around me. It was all around me in Hawaii there. And I just didn't see it. And what I realized was that I was living in a very unique situation where my patients were they had grown up like in this, like it was like a window to another time because Hawaii wasn't even a state until like the 40s. And then a lot of places didn't even have electricity till the 70s. So people knew how to live off the land. And that is how people used to live. And that is actually what defined our nutrition requirements, how people strategized nutrition living off the land. That is what we should have learned, what I should have learned in medical school. And if all doctors learned those simple kinds of strategies, then we wouldn't have 90% of things being idiopathic. We'd be able to cure probably 95% of those idiopathic things and prevent them, given enough time, right? It takes generations to correct some diseases, but still it's hopeless now. Doctors are agents of disease because what we learn now is wrong. So we're making people sick, and that's a real tragedy.
Yeah, it definitely is. And it's so refreshing to have a different perspective from someone that has actually gone through and learned and like trained as a traditional or as a doctor, as you say, I guess I don't want to use the word traditional because then we start thinking of right. Traditional ways, but yeah. But it is so refreshing to have this different perspective because nutrition is not usually something that doctors are so focused on. But having learned that firsthand yourself, you can see the benefits. And then what made you kind of, once you worked on yourself, what made you then kind of like think, oh, how can I bring this into my practice and help others?
Well, what really was apparent was that I really wanted to prevent a tragedy, right? So we already had such healthy people on Hawaii where they knew how to do all this stuff. They're like little gems of wisdom. They just know that if you want to grow the best tomatoes, then you have to let the chickens run through once a day because they're going to pick off the bugs, and then that makes the eggs tastier. They just knew like 1,000 things. And I didn't want that to be lost. And so I really wanted to help people understand that that's what we should be paying attention to, not this garbage about cholesterol and saturated fat and, micromanaging things that we don't learn properly. We don't learn about, we don't learn the truth about, and we don't really understand. And we're talking about food in a ridiculous way. When we say things like you need a certain percentage of cholesterol in your diet, or, that's just absolutely, it's based on, not on like a philosophy of healing. It's based on a philosophy of a guy with an ego who wanted to prove that his idea about what causes heart attacks was the correct idea. And it was incorrect, but we're still the American Heart Association still carries that torch about saturated fat and cholesterol. And that's the tragedy that I wanted to prevent continues to unfold. Like every day we lose thousands of people in their 80s who grew up being self-sufficient and, grew up knowing how to prevent disease and heal diseases in ways that we may never hear about because we're not asking them what they did.
Yeah, so true. And so what do you think is something that just somebody listening can do to help like prevent these loss? Like, I know that you're working towards it. I know that Holly and I are always promoting the message of real food and nutrition. What's something that just the average listener can do to prevent some of these things?
Well, if they're looking to help their own health, the first step is like getting your head wrapped around the idea that doctors, dietitians, most nutritionists, sports nutritionists, people who are health professionals have been brainwashed into believing the wrong ideas. And so that means that you probably have been brainwashed into having this real fear of fat and cholesterol and salt, because all those things you've heard so many times are unhealthy. So you have to like detoxify that nutrition misinformation from your mind, and that'll make space for some good stuff. And so on my website I have like a lot of how this all came to pass. Like, how is it that 70 years after this man who, with the ego that I mentioned, came up with this idea that saturated fat and cholesterol, 7 years later, we're still talking about how is that going down? And so, maybe you guys can link to that. It's an ebook that you can download from my website for free.
Yeah, great. Yeah, awesome. Well, I'll definitely link that up, and I think that's really interesting for listeners to go and have a look at. And also, you've written a couple of books, so let's talk about some of the books that you've written. Which one did you write first?
Deep Nutrition. Why your genes eat traditional food. I happen to have it right here.
Oh, good.
What a beautiful book it looks like.
Yeah. Holly's got it too.
And it's I'm really proud of that book because unlike any other book out there, I think it tries to reframe the whole nutrition conversation in a more helpful way, which is a different paradigm than right now, when everybody talks about nutrition, they talk about what not to eat,
Mm,
you know,
yeah.
and even like the low carb diet is defined by less carb. Okay, well,
Yeah.
so what do you eat?
Yeah.
Right? It's vague, right? I mean,
Yeah.
I know you guys know, but but like nutrition isn't the absence of something, but that if you listen to the American Heart Association, a healthy diet is low in salt, it's low in fat, it's low in cholesterol. You don't want to get too much protein either. So why don't we all just eat cardboard and then just be
Mm.
super healthy? I mean, that's absurd, but that's where we're at. And so I mean, obviously they don't recommend cardboard, but they recommend the next closest thing actually, which is like the lettuce, like high fiber foods, which these days don't have very much nutrition. I mean, I'm not anti-plant, but I'm pro flavor and I'm pro nutrition. And if your lettuce tastes like cardboard, it's probably about as beneficial to your health as the carton it came in. So deep nutrition, what I did, my husband and I had this idea that if there were certain things that we were seeing people eat all around the world, maybe those are important. And we were seeing that like after, so we were living on Hawaii when all this happened. And in Hawaii, like what they eat there is definitely not standard American fare. It's, you go to any kind of a buffet party, at least this was, 10, 15 years ago now, at least, hopefully things haven't changed, but you see wild colors and they're made out of meats, right? Like you see purple and yellow and, colors that you wouldn't think you could get without vegetables. So they like really know how to make crazy use of everything. They would hunt pig, they would hunt goat, they would fish, they would have a lot of stuff raw, and of course they grew their own vegetables too, to kind of enhance the flavor of their soups and stuff like that. It can't all just be meat, but so we noticed that they were using a lot of organs. We noticed they were doing a lot of broths using bones. We noticed they were fermenting foods. And then we were watching Anthony Bourdain's show, No Reservations, which is this amazing travel show that he goes all over the place. And he always had like the same structure to his shows. Like he would go to a fancy upscale restaurant, the places you have to go. And then like, it seemed like his favorite place to go was always the mom's house, like where grandma spends all day in the kitchen cooking. And she just like makes this unbelievable spread of stuff. And that's the traditional, that is the gold. That is someone who's carrying the torch of knowledge, really. I mean, these people they're experts, and we don't treat them like that. We treat them like, oh, well, she just loves cooking, she's kind of crazy, but no, that's our American culture. I mean, maybe it's not like that everywhere, but that's how it is in America. And so we don't respect them for that wisdom. And so my husband and I, we kind of started taking to studying what is like a traditional meal, and what is different about that, what is distinct about that from what we eat now, and on the flip side, what do they all have in common? And that's what we wrote about in Deep Nutrition. That's like the centerpiece of the function of Deep Nutrition, is to understand that our genes need traditional food. I'm going to show you this. Why it's the subtitle here. That's why your genes need traditional food. And when I say traditional food, I don't mean that if you're German, that you have to have German food. I mean that traditional food is pretty much identical nutritional profiles, no matter whether you're in Alaska, Hawaii, or France, or Japan, or what, because people use the same 4 strategies around the entire globe to extract the maximum nutrition, like the same 4 culinary strategies, right? And that's what we talk about in Deep Nutrition. And that's like kind of what I'm the most proud of, because no one else is talking about that. And I think it's so essential. And it just kind of you can't argue. I mean, you can argue anything, but you shouldn't, you're stupid to argue with thousands of years of generations of success, where people who didn't have electricity, didn't have antibiotics, didn't have running water, they were able to make it to 80 pretty regularly. And that's because they were tough as nails, and their diet was making them stronger instead of weaker, which is what the American diet does.
Yeah, I so agree with you. I have seen so many times where like an elderly person, even in my own family, have been strong, fit, healthy, always eaten food cooked from home, you know, worked in the garden, done all of these kind of things. And then as they're starting to age, the doctor has gotten some lab work back and it said something like, oh no, you better watch your cholesterol, and switch them over to a low fat diet, eating margarine. Like, seriously, I'm there's one of my non-negotiables is if you eat margarine, you can't talk to me. and then watch their health deteriorate so rapidly from this change in diet that the doctor has suggested when they've been doing just fine all these years eating butter. You know, it's so sad the way that the world is going with all of this. So I'm so glad that we have a book like yours to be able to reference to and see this. I love this. I love even at the start how you go through Weston A. Price and the studies that he did. It's such a fascinating story, isn't it? I wish that I just love his story, how he went around to the cultures and, you know, saw the changes in them during that time. You know, it's just more people need to understand that.
I think it was really inspirational for me to read that book and see that, yeah, I was on the right track with what I thought made sense to do, because it was similar idea. I mean, I don't know how it was really different actually than what his goal was. He was trying to define a healthy diet too. And he just actually physically went there and went to the lab and like did all these amazing measurements. And like that one book just has like a tiny fraction of it. The rest is like in Price Pottenger Nutrition Foundation library and scattered around the world now, unfortunately. Yeah, so it was the same idea. Like he had this fundamental belief that people should not have crooked teeth. I mean, it seems like almost obscure and like a weird thing to be the thing that launches an entire career. But he realized that he lived in the 20s and 30s. I don't know if you want me to go into this at all, like if you talk about this all the time or not.
Oh no, we haven't talked about it, so it's great. Yeah.
Okay. But yeah, so he lived in the 20s and 30s when they were just kind of understanding vitamins and just learning some really great ways to use animals to be surrogates for what is a healthy diet. And he was able to, the reason that he got into this was because he couldn't stand all the suffering he was causing by pulling kids' teeth and putting in braces, right? Because back in the 20s, what did they have for anesthesia? Something that might kill you. So you didn't really do, it was ether. You didn't really do a lot of anesthesia if you didn't really, really need to. So there was a lot of screaming and torture happening, and he really didn't like that. And it really, really got to him. And so he was like, this can't be normal. I mean, we can't be the only species that has crooked teeth, because, dogs, cats, if you are ever on a farm, you see animals with straight teeth. Why don't people have that? And so he also had this experience of hunting in Canada and noticing that he just felt better when he was away from when he was living off the land, really, and away from processed foods and convenience foods, which were so limited compared to what we have now. And he still noticed a difference. So he would spend weeks hunting Canada and eat like live, things that he caught himself, squirrels and beavers and fish and birds and all kinds of stuff. So those two things like really made him think, gosh, I really want to figure out what is a healthy human diet. And to do that, he had to find people who were healthy themselves and then just ask them what to eat. So it's a really brilliant strategy. I mean, it's underestimated. This is something that is the basic question. What do you need to do to find out what is a healthy human diet? Well, you need to find humans who are healthy. And we never do that. Like any of the article that actually, we might get around to talking to the article that you pointed out about something about what does the science say about healthy oils. None of that so-called science ever refers to anything along the lines of what Weston Price does, because our science is inferior to that because the theory behind it is inferior, right? Science is like a computer, garbage in, garbage out. If you ask a stupid hypothetical question, then you're going to get an answer that has like not very great value. But the most important question ever to ask nutrition wise is, what do healthy humans eat? And that's what Weston Price did. And no one has done that on the scale that he did. There was a few books about it. Like one of them is The Blue Zones. Have you guys heard of that book?
Yeah.
What did you think of that book?
Well, yeah, go ahead.
I read that. Well, I've just heard people talking about it, but I have not picked that one up yet.
So it's they go to 4 places that are blue zone. Blue zone's a place where people supposedly live longer than anywhere else on Earth. And the reason I say supposedly is because they didn't go to Hawaii and they went to California instead. And actually in Hawaii, we live longer. And so they went to a little place called Loma Linda, California, where there's a lot of Seventh-day Adventists who are really into living off the land. And they are living on small animals like chicken and fish instead of cows. And so they called them vegetarians. I mean, it was a completely biased book that was funded by the Seventh-day Adventists, was funded by them. So they went to 3 other places where they all ate tons of meat, but that didn't really make it into the talking points in the media around the book. If you read the book, you'll see there's like these old guys that are making sausage, eating lard. They're just like loaded with animal products. And yet that's not what the conclusion is. And that didn't make it into the talking points, and nobody like seemed to notice. It's really bizarre. You see what you expect to see. And so everybody thinks that meat is unhealthy. So blah, blah, blah. Anyway, that's like the second, like closest to Weston Price. Go somewhere where people are healthy. But he didn't really define healthy in a very complete way, the way Weston Price did. Like Weston Price looked at whether or not your teeth had cavities and whether or not they were straight. And the profound importance of whether or not your teeth are straight is something else that doctors don't learn. Here's what's so profoundly important about it. If you have straight teeth, that means that your skeleton has developed properly. If you don't have straight teeth, it means it hasn't. And why would that be? Well, I can tell you it's not genetic, because you can see within the space of 3 generations in one family, and my family, my grandparents, none of them needed glasses and none of them needed braces. And in my generation, I think like 80% of us needed either glasses or braces, and most of us needed both, or had teeth pulled or something like that. And that means our diet wasn't right. The way that we grow is dependent on what we eat, just like a plant, just like anything. And it's not magic. But yet, when doctors go to medical school, we treat it like it's magic. And we literally think of it that way. Oh, a new baby, it's a miracle. No, it's science. It's the amazing science that nature has, displays for us every single day, and we don't pay attention to it the way that people did 100 years ago, when lives depended on what mom ate while she was pregnant. So I could just go on about that forever. And so let me know if you want to change this topic.
Well, you don't need to go on about it forever, because people can read more about it in Deep Nutrition, and we'll link that into the show notes. How about that? But it is certainly so many interesting topics that you cover in the book. And Holly and I are going to draw from a couple of concepts that we've been talking about on the podcast, and getting your opinion and ideas on those. Did you want to say something, Holly?
No.
Okay.
No, sorry, I just unmuted, but go ahead.
That's all right. I'm going to let you talk in a minute, because we haven't let you talk yet. I did want to ask you though. I do have a little article here. So one of the ideas of the podcast is we look at these. There's so much news articles out in the media, and most of them Holly and I look at it and are just like, okay, where did this study come from? Is this even true? Is this just some sensationalized journalist making this up? It's very rare to find an article with substance, and I think I've got one that's probably not one of substance here, about anti-aging. And one of the reasons I brought this one up was because a few times on the podcast recently, Holly and I have been talking about, both of us being in our 40s and still having really great skin, and we attribute that to our nutrition, but a lot of people don't actually attribute it to nutrition. So I was wondering what your opinion was. Can you add in these foods that they're suggesting in the article and maybe change your nutrition and end up with beautiful looking skin?
100% you can change your diet, but not what they're talking about, not what they suggest in the article. I don't even remember what they suggested. It was probably some like,
it was like, red bell peppers, berries, broccoli, leafy greens, nuts, avocados, sweet potato, and pomegranates.
Plants, right?
Plants.
So, I mean, yeah, the plants aren't always the answer. Plants make meat taste good. And so I love them because they taste good themselves sometimes. If you have a really great salad dressing or something, you need a lot of fat, you need a lot of stuff to make plants taste good, because by themselves, they're not that great these days. Like if you grow your own garden, that's another story. But you don't have to eat plants. The key thing, and they sort of touch on this in the article, they said that the best science suggests that calorie restriction is actually the only thing that's ever really been studied actually in this modern era in terms of longevity. And calorie restriction, I want to talk about that because that's really important to understand. They've had like 60 Minutes. It's a real popular news show. They had like a 60-minute show called The Skinnies, where they had these people who were just like so unhealthy looking. Their spines were like hunched. They weren't getting enough protein, obviously. And they were like, I feel great. Because they were cutting their calories. There's a lot wrong with that. And so, first of all, when Americans are eating a diet that is 60% processed food, 30% of that is processed oils, highly toxic, the most toxic thing you can put into your body that is called food, are the seed oils. And then the other 30% is refined sugars and flours. Okay. So in this country, 60% of our diet is totally devoid of nutrition and contains toxins. You cut back on that, that will help extend your life, but that's not equivalent to calorie restriction. But that's how they do the studies, right? So you can just cut back on the garbage and not have to calorie restrict, and you're going to get a lot of benefits. Like that's what I recommend. And that is the sum total of what I recommend in terms of what to cut out. Stop eating the seed oils and stop eating the refined sugars and flours in such quantity, right? Like if you want to make a nice roux or a gravy and you've got some bone stock, you want to thicken it, use regular flour if that's what you got. But don't make a meal out of things made out of refined flour. Like don't make a pasta plate that's 2 pounds of pasta and 4 ounces of red sauce made with seed oils. Don't do that. That's not going to be good for you. And if anything's going to age you, doing that over day is going to age you, because you can't. What is aging? So this is not something that they talk about because they don't understand this. What you have to understand biochemistry to understand aging. And I went to Cornell for biochemistry because I love biochemistry, and I thought it was like the secret to understanding the body, and it really truly is. It's like math, right? You can use math, like Einstein predicted all these things using math that turned out to be true. Like still to this day, people are discovering things that, oh, Einstein predicted that. He predicted dark matter, all these things. Anyway, so the math of the body is biochemistry. And when I first discovered these things called polyunsaturated fatty acids that they oxidize, that's when I knew that was what was making me sick. That was the biggest thing in my diet that was making me sick. I had to stop eating seed oils, soy, corn, canola, cottonseed, that are high in polyunsaturated fatty acids because they oxidize, and that is what causes disease. So that is like accelerated aging is disease. Accelerated aging that's in one tissue more than another. Alzheimer's is accelerated aging in the brain. Heart failure, that's accelerated aging in the heart. Hypertension, gout, and kidney problems, same thing for the kidney. And it all comes mostly from this chemical thing called oxidative stress. And what causes oxidative stress more than anything else is these polyunsaturated fatty acids. They deplete our bodies of things like of vitamins, and they age us. So if you want to not age, you have to understand what seed oils are and how to avoid them. And you have to be motivated because it's not easy. They're in everything. But if you wonder why people are suddenly sick and we weren't, like I don't know how many people I've spoken to that they'll say, like, my grandma, she just ate whatever, she raised her own food and she lived into her 80s and 90s. She never went to a doctor. Like, how many times have you heard that story?
Yeah.
Right. They didn't eat these seed oils. And so, aside from the 4 pillars of world cuisine, which are the 4 strategies people do that I talk about in deep nutrition, you also have to get these toxins out. And so, but you do that, and that is your best answer to living longer, feeling great, not having your mind lose your mind before, you lose your body, I guess.
Yeah, definitely. Holly, I'm going to throw over to you because you've got some questions around industrial seed oils to ask.
I do. I love this conversation. And yeah, like Leah said, people ask us all the time, but people always ask, oh, what products do you use on your face? What can we do? It's like, oh no, it's internal. It's cellular, honey.
Yes, right. That's right. I mean, if you want to buy products, buy good quality food.
Exactly. And drink your water. Okay. Yes. I'm so glad we're talking about oils because I feel like more people are talking about health in terms of nutrition. I feel like the last couple of years, people are really looking for answers about health. And you already kind of touched on this about kind of having to relearn what we've been taught or brainwashed into believing about what's correct about nutrition. So there's more people wanting to know and realizing that maybe we haven't always been told the full story. And so they're asking questions. And I feel like oils and seed oils is something that people are kind of understanding, oh yeah, I shouldn't, but I'm not really sure why. And I think there's a lot of ways to go with it. So we're going to use this article as just kind of like a way to flow through this, because I really want to hear your thoughts on it. So for our listeners, this article is just talking about 4 healthy oils to cook with. And it's saying that when you're cooking with oils have a smoke point or temperatures at which they become no longer stable, and you shouldn't cook with them. So you shouldn't be cooking with oils at temperatures above their smoke point. So we're going to talk about these 4 oils. And I think, first of all, let's talk about, Dr. Cate, what exactly is a smoke point? What are these oils? I know you're the expert. You're the hateful 8 queen when it comes to oils. So this article covers 4 oils, but let's just back up before we talk about those. Why does cooking oil matter when it comes to our health? You've already touched on oxidative stress, but maybe we can go a little deeper there.
Cooking oil can be the worst source of this oxidative stress if you choose the wrong cooking oil. And so of what this article talks about, olive, avocado, sesame, and safflower oils. And of the 4, 2 of them I wouldn't cook with. And that's because they break down when heated. They break down molecularly, and they oxidize, and they form like kind of a polymer. A polymer being like like a long collection of molecules all glommed and stuck together. And they also form toxins. They form a whole bunch of crazy stuff because it's just random reactions happening, and it's going to be different depending on exactly what you're cooking and all this kind of stuff. But it's never going to be good when they're oils that are just designed to break apart. That's what polyunsaturated fatty acids, they are actually designed by nature to break apart. That's why they're in seeds, because they help the germination process. They are so sensitive to temperature that they are a key part of how does the plant know it's warming up. These polyunsaturated fatty acids that are in these seed oils that I'm always trying to help people avoid. There's that sensitive to temperature that they help a seed germinate in the spring. And we're talking about just like a temperature change of what, 10, 20, 30 degrees, not 200 degrees. So when you fry them in a pan, you pretty much can obliterate them. And when you do that, when you obliterate molecules like that, you are creating toxins. It's just, you know, you're creating things that nature didn't intend to happen, and certainly didn't intend for you to eat. And we're eating them. And the oil scientists who study this stuff, they have been warning for decades that there are so many toxins produced in these two kinds of oils if you were to cook with them, safflower and sesame, but also the other members of the hapolate. And they can't gain any traction with our warnings because of the American Heart Association and the whole disinformation campaign. They're having us pay attention to just the wrong things. But yeah, so did that answer the question?
It does, yeah. Because yeah, people were told to cook with vegetable oils. And pretty much if you go out to eat, everything's cooked in a vegetable oil. And so, and I know there's even like some debate around olive oil and at what point that's safe to cook with. Because I know olive oil, like even with when you're roasting your vegetables or whatever, like, and you know, that's still a gray area for me, because I think there was even like a new article or a new study that came out that said it was a little bit higher than we originally thought it was. What is the truth about olive oil? Can we roast with olive oil?
About all oils is that smoke point has nothing to do, has no bearing on the health impacts of an oil or its culinary uses. It is not a useful marker. I believe it was one of these things that was created by the seed oil industry just to like try to be like, okay, so if they made something up to be like, use this instead of that, right? And yeah, you refine any oil and it will have a higher smoke point, because what you're doing is you're refining out the things that smoke. And so you can take olive oil and refine it and elevate the smoke point. But refined olive oil is less healthy. And the smoke point doesn't tell you at what you really need to know, which is how stable are these fatty acids to oxygen? Are they breaking down into toxins? Are they forming these polymers? Are they going to kill you? The smoke point doesn't tell you anything about that. And it's completely irrelevant culinary wise. In pretty much every situation, except possibly one exception might be a deep fat fryer. Because the temperature of the oil is super duper high, but no other situations. Because when let's say you're making a steak, right? And you want to, what oil should I use for my steak? Well, you can use butter, right? Butter smokes at a really low, it's a very low smoke point, but you can do that thing in butter. And if you want to mix it with olive oil, that kind of helps. The two support each other. That's what a lot of chefs do. They mix it with olive oil. And what you want when you're cooking a steak is, do you want it to be leather?
No,
I don't. Not me.
I don't.
You don't want that thing to be that hot, but you want color. Color is flavor. So you're trying to get color, and you get color sooner with a lower smoke point oil like butter. So you don't have to destroy it to get more flavor. Oh, and P.S. olive oil and butter have great flavor. What does canola oil taste like? What does safflower oil taste like? Nothing. It's dead. It kills flavor. It kind of like coats your tongue and prevents flavor from hitting your taste buds. It's anti-flavor. So yeah, so the smoke point is a complete made up thing. Don't pay any attention to it. What you should pay attention to is, what does your food sound like when it's cooking? Because, you know, you learn what it sounds like, you learn what it smells like, you learn what it looks like. That's when you flip it over. Don't be like, nobody makes a steak by checking the temperature of the smoke point of the oil before they put this. Nobody does that. So you don't need to pay attention to that.
Okay, that's good to know. So I also know that these seed oils are just everywhere. And so when we're going out to eat, it's very difficult to avoid rancid oils, seed oils when we go out, because they're pretty much put into every sauce, every marinade, everything. That's what's in the deep fryer in restaurants. And so do you have any like practical advice for people who want to be cautious and want to try to avoid these things, but also still want to go out and enjoy a meal or traveling and stuff once in a while? Like what's your advice for people there?
Yeah, so, if you're talking about somewhere where you live, it's worth probably investing a little time and making some phone calls and find a restaurant where they use olive oil or they use butter or something like more traditional. There are like, if you're lucky enough to live in somewhere like LA, there's like traditional Mexican restaurants where they're just going to use lard. They're not going to use anything that's not traditional.
I love that.
And the same goes for a lot of other ethnic restaurants. So that's like ethnic restaurants when they're truly traditional. Even that you can't talk to them to ask them if they don't speak English, but if you bring a friend, yeah. So that's one thing. And then the other thing is, it's just avoid the worst of the worst, right? Like, let's say you got to go to, I don't know, something like a steakhouse, right? And you don't know what they're going to cook anything in, but the worst of the worst is the deep fried stuff, or, or things that are breaded, right? So steak isn't deep fried, and don't get it breaded. You can ask them if they will be nice to you and cook it in, like, sear it on butter, or if they have olive oil or anything like that for you special. But if they won't, it's not a lot being absorbed, right? And cook it rare, because the heat makes it all happen faster and makes it worse. So if you like it rare, it's better for you that way anyway. And it's certainly better when they're talking about seed oils. And then you just think about surface area. So like a chunk is going to have less opportunity for the oil to come all in there, right? So stir-fried rice is some of the most oily coated tiny little pieces of things. So it's really bad compared to steamed rice with like a chunk of something, even if it was stir-fried, like fish, just like a big hunk of fish. Right. So, and bigger chunks of vegetables and soups. There's actually a lot of tips that I have for eating out. I think that's in my Fat Burn Fix book, but there's so many different things that you can do that, like, I eat out and I don't have a problem really, because there's always something.
Nice. I'm glad you touched on the Fat Burn Fix, because that is one book of yours that I don't have. Could you want to just talk about that real fast? Like, so we talked about deep nutrition. What does Fat Burn Fix cover that deep nutrition does not?
So deep nutrition talks about what we should eat, and like the promise of health, and the worst of the worst things being the oils and the refined stuff that I talked about. But the Fat Burn Fix talks about how does all that translate to our obesity and metabolic disease epidemics. And the answer is that it steals your body's energy. And so that has really a lot of profound impacts on your health, how you feel, your mental state, your relationship with food, if you're somebody who has food issues, right? Like food addictions. No way are you going to be free from those things unless you get your body's energy systems back online. And so that's what the Fat Burn Fix does. And I've had people write me about it to thank me, because they were like, one person in particular, I'm thinking of, she wrote this long and passionate letter about, like, I struggled under the crushing thumb of like food addictions my whole life. And now I'm finally free, because she was able to transform her metabolism and then do the other work, right? All the great work that psychologists can do for people with food addictions, it can't take if your metabolism isn't working right and your brain isn't getting energy, and you have an addiction to the energy in the worst, most unhealthy foods. You're addicted to their energy. And that's, you can't go anywhere until you solve that addiction. And that's what the Fat Burn Fix does. And it actually helps you assess, like, I have something that people can download for free to see if they might benefit from this book. I have on my website a fat burn factor quiz. And what that quiz is all about is assessing how well your body's able to burn your body fat for energy. It's really about assessing the most fundamental thing in the health of your metabolism. That's it. If you can burn your body's fat for energy efficiently, if you have metabolic flexibility. So this just gives you a number to help you gauge your metabolic flexibility. And then the plan helps you walk through, okay, so if this is your score, you can't do keto yet. You have to do a little variation on keto that I have in the book. If this is your score, you're not ready for intermittent fasting. You have to get your metabolism healthier. And, there's a lot of great things that are out there now that are really popular, but I just want to help make sure that people get the most effective one for what their current metabolic health is at the moment. And
I love that. That is so important, because Leah and I can't tell you how many people we've heard say, I can't do keto, or fasting doesn't work for me. And it's like, maybe just not right now. You're not there yet. You don't just jump into that stuff. Your body needs to do healing and repair work first. And so I didn't know you had this assessment. I'm so glad you shared it with us, because I know there are so many people who want to make changes, and they're ready to make those drastic changes, but to have the stepping stones on how to get there in a roadmap is going to be so helpful. So I'm so glad you shared that.
Thanks.
So we will link that up in the show notes for sure, along with your website. Do you want to share your website with our listeners?
It's drcate.com. So it's DRCATE. No dot after the doctor either.
Okay. Easy enough. We can remember that. drcate.com. We will link in the show notes her website, where you can get her books, and that amazing assessment. So if you're looking for where you should get started with improving your health, you will have all the information you need. Leah, do you have anything you want to add?
This has just been such a great conversation. Thank you, Dr. Cate. And I know we could probably talk for another few hours. There's so many topics that we didn't even get into that I just want to ask you questions about. So we might have to make a date to get you back on another time and talk more about the Fat Burn Fix book and go more into that metabolism healing and understanding and stuff like that. So I think that we'll to be continued.
Great.
Yes, thank you so much for coming on. This has been such a wonderful conversation, and I echo Leah's thoughts that I could just keep asking you questions all day. So thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you guys so much. I am putting together a certification course that should hopefully be available within 12 months. So so for experts, because that's who I've spent a lot of time speaking with, and just kind of helping, use the tools that we all learn, but kind of put them into a system a little bit more organized.
Yeah, that's going to be awesome. Definitely. And much needed, because there are practitioners out there as well looking for how to get to that next level with helping people. So thank you. We'll definitely reconnect when the time is, so we can share that for you as well. Well, that is the end of today's episode. Our theme music is by Andrew Bowden, and production services are by Kevin Kennedy Spain of Disc of Light Media. Have a great week, everyone.
Have a great week.